Dave, hi.
Hey, Annie, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I am splendid. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks so much for doing this.
Thanks
For those
for the
who
invitation.
are on right now, Dave is joining us from LA, so it's much earlier and not lunchtime there for him, but we're really excited and grateful that you joined us. So thank you so much.
I'm happy to be here, and let me just say congratulations to the class of 2020. You guys are real scrappy and
I know.
uh, went through a lot to get here, and it's fantastic. We were lucky to get snow days back when
I
I was a country.
It's so true. That's so true. Um, well, let's get started. It's 12:07 Eastern Time. But for those of you who are hopping on and those of you who will watch recorded later, we are really excited to have Dave Das here. He's class of 2002, and he is participating in our Lunch with Alumni series. But one thing I'm really excited about is that Dave can shed some light for us on some of the civil rights work that he's done both as a lawyer and before he went to law school. So, just with everything going on in our world right now, I think it's really important that we at Country Day are having these conversations about social justice, police brutality, systemic inequity, and systemic racism. And I'm really grateful to you for sharing your expertise with us on that matter. So, before we get to all that, though, I think it's probably best for us to take it back to upper school Dave. Um, Tell us about some of the activities you were involved in. What sports did you play? Um, Things like that. Just bring us into your world a little bit.
Sure. I really loved my time at Country Day, but I have to, point out that I struggled with Country Day as well. Academically, it was extremely difficult for me to just keep up with all the demands and the incredibly brilliant classmates that
Right.
that I school with. But that being said, I think that I found a lot of success in that process
Mhm.
of country pushing me to do all these things. So like for activities, I was always on stage during the dramas and the
Right.
musicals. Uh,
Okay.
Jeff Nahan.
Right.
And those experiences were so, positive and uplifting for me. And they kind of, helped me to understand that I had value and I had talent to
Hmm.
bring to the table, even if I could not do as well, in terms of my grades. I had other things that, I could contribute. So that was a very positive, I think, experience for me overall, even though I didn't do well. I mean, grades wise, you have to measure your success in different ways. I think, there's different ways to evaluate that experience. In terms of sports, I played ultimate frisbee. I don't know
Okay.
if you guys still have an ultimate frisbee team,
Hmm.
but that's what I did back then. I think it had just started. We had played.
Yeah, I remember for sure. Definitely.
That was a lot of fun. And yeah, those were my activities. I remember, even though I struggled in school, I remember pushing myself to take a lot of honors classes,
Okay.
especially in the English department. I
Yeah.
thought the writing instruction at Country Day was
Yeah.
extremely effective, and it
Mhm.
really prepared me well. And I think it was in those classes that I developed sort of a radical consciousness,
Mhm.
reading some of these wonderful books and works that were being taught. So it was a very big part of my formative my growing up.
Sure. So, how would you recommend that current students at Country Day think about how to face adversity and challenge in a school setting? I mean, I think when you're, in your career and you have had more life experiences, that can come a little bit more naturally. But as a student, what would you say to kids who are faced with a challenge and they're not totally sure how to address it?
Yeah, it is a challenge. I think that you have to do a lot of self-reflection and processing,
Hmm.
and you you have to see things in a more comprehensive light. If you are just judging yourself on one metric, one criteria, that is discounting a lot of other opportunities
Yep.
that you have, that you might have success in, and they shouldn't be discounted. I think that like, for example, some people do very, very well on the sports fields. I didn't do well in sports really, but I think I appreciate that experience for what it contributes to you in kind of building a career or building a life for yourself. Because what I see Country Day's education is, it's more training than what,
Yes.
importance is the training, not so much what the material that you're learning. The material that you're learning is important, but it's the practice and the habits that you're developing in competing with so many talented people that prepares you to compete in college, and even more so, I think, in the workforce.
Yes.
When
Yeah.
career, those sports experiences, for example, those experiences on the sports field are going to, I think, really make a huge difference in your career, because you're going to learn, you have that drive, that grit.
Right.
And that's kind of what I would hope students could maybe, take away from this, is that there's not just one way to succeed there. And even if you're struggling, just keep going, keep pushing yourself to try to do your best, and just understand that the training that you're getting, the habits that you're developing are going to pay dividends later on, even if it doesn't seem like it's paying off now. You just have to have faith.
Right. That it will. And, going back to what you were saying about the training, and you referenced sports, but like your acting and theater experience obviously probably impacts what you do now as a trial lawyer
Oh,
too.
absolutely. I mean, trials are black box theater.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It was actually, I think, my love of theater that made me want to be,
Yeah.
on a big level. I'm not sure that I would have done this career had I not had those experiences. So
Yes. Okay.
that's the kind, you have to kind of sit back and take a big picture look, and it's hard to do that when you're in the thick of it. But
Right. Right.
get
Exactly. Okay. So you start off your college career at DePaul, and
yes.
what initially made you want to go there, and what factors kind of played into your college selection process at that time?
Well, at the time, I wanted to keep acting as a career.
Okay.
I wanted to continue in the theater and acting vein, and I remember having a lot of help from my college counselor, Miss Sandoval.
Okay.
I don't know if she's still there, but she was extremely helpful.
Yeah.
So Miss Sandoval kind of guided me in picking a college that I think was more right for me,
Mm-hmm.
rather than what everyone else was doing. I think that's a real that was very helpful for me.
Mm-hmm.
And DePaul was a good school because I think for me, I needed to get out of Michigan. I needed to see other places. I'm not saying that's good for everyone, but at the time that was good for me. And it was nice to be living in a big city in Chicago and
Right.
kind of, have these new experiences. It was a big part of the education that I got.
For sure. And then, so you go to DePaul, and I'm sure it was, a really interesting transition to come from living in, Metro Detroit to going to big city Chicago. And then you're at DePaul, but then you end up transferring to Occidental. So walk us through a little bit about your headspace at that time. And then just for anybody who is, considering transferring to a new college, what advice do you have for those students and like, what should they be thinking about in that process?
Sure. Transferring was a very good experience for me. I mean, I didn't think of it. I never even thought about transferring while I was in high school.
Okay.
I didn't think of transferring. I didn't even really know that was the thing. I thought most people just went to college, and it was just easier and just conventional route to just stay in your college and do that. But a lot of people transfer.
Totally.
And it's a good way to, just build off of what you're working on. So like when I was at Country Day, I would probably not have gotten into Occidental at that time because of, my grades.
Mm-hmm.
So Paul was gracious enough to accept me. And so when I got there, it was easier than I thought college was going to be. I was just so well trained to write papers and read books and just I was able to succeed there, and then I was able to take the good grades that I got at DePaul and leverage them. And I got into Occidental and the University of Michigan, but I
Okay.
was trying to go out west for whatever. I think I was just, I needed some good weather in my life at that time.
Oh,
I was,
we get that. Yeah.
yeah, it was hard. Those winters are, I get seasonal depression or something.
Yeah.
But
Or
and
no
then,
joke.
and, yeah, right. And then Occidental had a good film program. So I was interested in trying to transition into a film program. And I was still kind of figuring things out, but that's why I decided to go to Occidental. The reason I didn't go to U of M is because I did a semester there, or I think spring semester, like a mini quarter, and it was just such a big school. And I had gotten to know myself enough in college at DePaul to know that I benefited from smaller classes and having kind of a more one-on-one relationship with my professors. And I knew I could get that at Occidental, which is a smaller liberal arts
Mhm.
college in a big city.
For sure.
So that's why I decided to do that. But I would I could have stayed in Michigan and it probably would have been okay.
Mhm.
It's just it worked out that way, and I think I made the right call because now I have this nice life in Los Angeles that I can be
Right.
proud of.
Exactly. So this was something I actually didn't realize at first, but you had a few roles and jobs and experiences before you ended up going to law school, which I think is incredibly valuable for anyone who's considering any kind of graduate degree. So tell us a little bit about what some of those experiences were. I know you were a field organizer for Obama. For anyone who's interested in politics, if you could just briefly tell us what it's like to be a field organizer and what that means. And then you also did some work with unions too, which it seems to me really was a place where you were able to start to understand some of the labor issues in this country. So I would love to hear about, the role that equity plays in working with unions and union negotiations and things like that.
Sure. Okay. So while I was at Occidental, I started an internship with Clergy and Laity United for Economic Justice. Now, this is just an internship that was part of a class, and I didn't have any ideas of a career doing it. I didn't think that was going to happen, but I just connected with the work so much, and so offers and opportunities kept coming from that one internship,
Mm-hmm.
and that made an impact on what I was going to do for like the next 5 years.
Okay.
But when I was in high school, I didn't know what an organizer was. I didn't know that was a thing.
Exactly.
So to clarify, an organizer is someone who helps people join forces to take action for some kind of positive change in their lives. An
Mm-hmm.
organizer can be a union organizer. A union organizer is someone who helps workers come together to challenge their employer on issues facing the workplace and collectively bargain, as you said. But an organizer can be a community organizer, like Barack Obama was in the South Side of Chicago, organizing just people in the neighborhood for community and public safety, things like that. Or you can be a field organizer on a political campaign. You're bringing people together to vote, essentially, and to bring others out to vote and to get out the vote. And so the term organizer can be used in just a lot of different contexts, but you have to
Okay.
have this basic skill set of, you got to be willing to get into people's faces, talk to
Mm-hmm.
people.
Yeah.
You got to be able to push them to do things that they didn't think were possible, that were that were inconceivable to them. You kind of help them to see a clear path to things that they didn't know were possible. It expands the notion of what is possible in your life at its best. So yeah, I mean, I learned so much from doing those experiences. That was, I think, the most important education that I ever got.
Mm-hmm.
That led me to decide to go to law school because I fell in love with advocacy,
Right.
helping people create a voice for themselves and better their lives.
Yeah. And I think something too with that specific type of work, you are really getting like a very solid grip on the issues, which then like makes your decision to go to law school probably that much more clear.
Yeah, exactly. It gave me some literacy on these difficult issues that I don't know if I had before. It developed a sophistication on, things that were very difficult, issues of equity.
Mhm.
And so to be able to have kind of practice made me a lot more confident. Because at the time, I think I thought about law school in college, but I didn't have at that time the confidence to do it. I was still not sure what I wanted to do. And so, for people who are thinking about law school,
Mhm.
I recommend, well, if you're not sure, I guess, if you're sure that you want to do it, certainly just go ahead and go. But it never hurts. Put it this
Right.
way, it doesn't hurt to go and have some other life experiences
Hmm.
before you dive into law school. Law school is a big commitment of time and money. You might find that you want to do something else. You might find that you have some other talents that,
Yeah.
that you devote your life to. But the thing that I also want to emphasize is that my organizing experience made me a better law student, and it makes me a much better lawyer now.
Hmm.
When I started practicing, I was able to just come out swinging. I was able to settle cases and advocate successfully and effectively because I had all this practice doing this difficult work before.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That makes perfect sense. So you go to law school in LA, correct? Was it Loyola?
Yes, that's right. Loyola Law School.
So at law school, when you were there, did you have any kind of like grounding experiences that really clarified for you, like, okay, this is exactly where I want to be? Because as you just pointed out, like there are plenty of people that go to law school who feel unsure. And then they see people who are really successful in their careers. And it seems like they just got there with no questions or anything like that. So I would love to hear, were there any foundational experiences that you had in your legal education where you were like, yes, this is where I'm meant to be?
Yeah, that's a good question. It took a while to get there.
Hmm.
Okay. But once I got to my trial advocacy classes, I was
That,
like, okay,
yeah.
I'm where I
Yeah.
need to be. This is the most fun thing in the world. It's just like it is on TV. I mean, it's a little different, but everyone I think at some point watches a lawyer on TV and are like, "Wow, that looks like fun." And
Yeah.
it is. It is an incredibly thrilling experience to be doing that. It's like being a fighter pilot or something.
Wow.
Um, so it took. Oh, I mean, I can imagine. I guess I've never been a fighter pilot, but for me, it feels like that. It's just like high stakes poker,
Right.
and all your focus, and you're fighting for someone's life and or
Right.
their livelihood, or something that has happened to them.
Mhm.
Um, the first year of law school was very hard. It was not so much fun. It was a lot of reading and doctrinal stuff. But once you get past that, you get to the fun. You can do the fun stuff that's more in tune with what you want to do.
Okay.
So yeah. At first I was having. At first there was a point where I was like, well, is this right for me? But I pushed through it, and I was happy that because I wanted to take those trial classes to see what that was like, and happily it was a good experience for me.
Okay. So now you work at Garagos and Garagos, which is a renowned
That's
trial law
right.
in the country.
Yeah, it's an internationally renowned trial firm.
So
One of
oh, yeah, one of
great.
the best, a lot of high profile cases. So tell us, how did you get a job there? And since then, um, what are some of the most high profile cases you've worked on? Give us a little bit of like your day to day in terms of who some of your clients are and really like what you've learned through the experiences of working with your clients.
Well, working at Garagos and Garagos is a lot of fun because we get to do a lot of the high profile stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I loved working on Colin Kaepernick's case,
Yep.
his grievance
Yeah.
against the NFL. I mean, that's one of the biggest cases of this decade. And it's having a lot more impact now
Yeah.
that we can reflect on it in the midst of what's happening.
Right.
Um, that was a fun case. And then there's other cases like the Jussie Smollett defense case. That was a big one. I do police shooting cases, some high profile ones. Maybe, not everyone's heard of them, but they're pretty big in Los Angeles. And for someone with my level of experience, I'm still relatively new in this career, but for
Right.
me to be able to work on these kinds of huge cases is really a privilege. I mean, it's really
Right.
awesome. That's the cool thing about working at that firm. And I like that it's got that diverse kind of
Mm-hmm.
body of. I like the high profile stuff, But for me, the most meaningful stuff are these mom and pop cases, these
Right.
police brutality victims, people who have gotten hurt or injured. And just some of my clients were prisoners and were denied medical care in prison. And
Wow.
so that is something that nobody who is going to fight for these people. No politician is advocating for prisoners who get sick. That is something lawyers can do, because
Lawyer.
when we
Yep.
sue the police or when we sue the county that administers these jails and prisons,
Mhm.
it puts a lot of pressure on them and it forces them to re-examine their policies and practices.
Right.
So I feel like part of my organizing life, my life, that was dedicated to advancing social movements, I'm still connected to it through my work as a lawyer, because there's a public policy element,
Sure.
um, underlying the work that I do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Have you thought about, just given, the cases that you've had specifically with police brutality, do you have any thoughts on the way that police departments should think about potentially reforming some of their practices?
Yes, I have a lot of thoughts. I mean, that could be, its own,
Um, yeah.
conversation. But, I think that the police have to re-examine their role in the community. There's
Mm-hmm.
this, it's hard to put into any one policy or practice. It takes a comprehensive, I think, systemic reevaluation. But police have to go from this warrior mentality, this warrior culture that we're against the civilians and
Mm-hmm.
and everyone's a threat,
Mm-hmm.
to more of kind of something like social workers. Like, for example, police officers are trained much more on how to subdue and overcome a potential threat. And so they've always got their ears perked for threats. They're always looking out for threats. They're always on guard for threats. And they
Mm-hmm.
see a lot of people who are, just regular pedestrians or people who are just kind of walking down the street. They're trained to view those people as threats. Whereas if we were to emphasize de-escalation practices, de-escalation tactics are a huge, part of the police officer's job, I think, that they don't get trained much on. They get trained,
Right.
maybe a few hours on that, but they're trained much more on use of force and subduing people. And so,
Right.
that training practice needs to be reevaluated. But I don't think it's any one thing. There's so many things that connect to this.
Yeah.
That's why it's good that what we're doing right now is kind of looking at police practices systemic and how that affects people and public safety.
Exactly. So, you are constantly dealing with, in your role as a trial lawyer at your firm, when a person has a breach in their civil rights or their civil rights are being violated. And so, as a trial lawyer, what do you make of everything going on right now? I mean, I know we touched on it a little bit, but how do you balance the fact that the legal system is there not only to uphold people's rights, but also is a system where people of color predominantly's rights are often they're not given the same merit as perhaps someone who is not a person of color, and we've seen that happen in the legal system. So I'm curious to your insight on that and how that disproportionately impacts communities around the country.
Sure. Well, the balance is looking at the values that the law espouses, which are good,
Mm-hmm.
and pairing that with practice, which
Sure.
is bad. So it's not like we can just that if we get people to get law degrees and become lawyers, that's going to fix anything.
Mm-hmm.
We have to re-examine the system from the electoral level too. We have to be voting for people who are going to protect people and not we for the last 20 years, and even before that, since the 80s, there have been these movements to be tough on crime, tough on drugs, tough, and what that has done has devastated communities of color, devastated people, predominantly low communities of low socioeconomic
Mm-hmm.
status, people who struggle economically are much more likely to have a police encounter and die from a police encounter. So the everyone has to get involved and pay attention to this, because the reforms and the changes that this movement that is happening right now all over this country are calling for will affect everyone, regardless of race.
Right.
If this works, if we can actually, cash in on the promises that are being touted right now, we're seeing a lot of statements of support and a lot of promises. It's all lip service without enforcement. This
Yep.
work has continued for a long time to hold people to this, this awakening of consciousness that they're communicating. But that's a very good first step.
Right.
We have to now work together to make sure that we're electing judges, first of all, who knows who to vote for, for judges. I don't know who to vote for. This we have to look at. We have to pay attention to these kind of local elections. District attorneys have a lot of power to prosecute the police. We have to start picking people who are going to espouse our values in practice. It's about who's doing what and putting pressure on them, political pressure, organizing around these issues to put pressure on people to, put values into practice.
Yes, absolutely. That's so true. And I love that. And so how can we then, kind of going off what you're saying, as a community, because, we all are responsible for looking out for one another. So how can we use our voices to ensure that all of us are granted equal rights under the law, especially now? What are ways that you, as a trial lawyer, recommend that we do that?
Okay. I have, I guess, two things that I would want people to think about. I would love to say, call this number or text this person and everything will be okay. But that's not the case. This is going to be a decades long struggle that is, has already been on for, decades and hundreds of years. In fact, we're seeing this kind of culmination of a very long history of oppression, and people kind of up to it, which is good. But the one is to educate yourself on what's happening. You have to pay attention to this, especially if you're skeptical or if you don't understand what's going on. If you're one of those people that thinks all lives matter and that's your opinion, fine. Get involved and participate and start talking to people. Because if you're not participating, I think the danger is, or if you're not educating yourself, I think the danger is that this movement is going to leave you behind. What has happened, the changes in social consciousness that are occurring, I think are going to be critical in your career. If you're an employer or if you're trying to get a job, I think you're going to have some literacy on this. It's going to come, problems may arise later on if you don't have some kind of understanding of what's happening. So I want people, this urge to tune out and say, it's too overwhelming, it's too complicated, I don't know what's going on, so I'm just going to keep pretending as if things are the same. They're not the same. Things are changing now. We're having a reckoning in our country, and everybody needs to step up and participate, no matter what you might believe, and be open-minded so you can your beliefs might change. Education is number one. Everyone's got to pay attention. Number two is organizing. Diversity and inclusion and education are all necessary. But if we're not working together and joining forces, none of that stuff really means that much in this context. And if we have made this decision to say, okay, we all want peace and love and law and order, we have to accept that the old way was not working. It was dysfunctional. And we have to start moving together, acting together to change things. And it starts, for high school students, I think it starts with your local community. Start with Country Day. Investigate whether there's institutional racism happening at Country Day. I'm sure it's not on purpose, but it takes a critical mindset and critical thinking to identify these things and to point them out and to speak truth to power. And only then can things change. And not just Country Day, but bring these conversations to your friends, your close circle of friends, your family. it's great that people are taking to the streets, but we got to take it to the classroom, to the living room, to, these more intimate, kind of close-knit relationships, so that it's not just something that we're separated from. It should be, ideally, this is an opportunity for us to have some kind of structural and change in consciousness. So that would be my hope, that people learn to organize and understand what that is, developing that kind of literacy in change making. And there's so many resources out there now for people who don't know how to do this. When I was a high school student, I didn't know what this was, and no one was encouraging me to even do this. It was kind of seen, I think, during my time at Country Day, we were encouraged not to challenge power.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is something that I think that would have, that the faculty and administration at Country Day can play an impact on that, certainly, in encouraging it. But even if that doesn't happen, it's really up to people to do it, who are subjects to an institution of power. Mm-hmm. It's on the students to do that. If they want to see things different in their community. That would be my things: education and organizing.
I love it. So we have time for one more question, if that's okay with you. And sure. I just would love to ask you, just sitting where you're sitting right now and thinking about your 12th grade self about to go off to college, what advice would you give to 12th grade you about what you're about to embark on, or, a 12th grader now about what they're about to embark on, and maybe ways to think about, their career or upcoming challenges, life, things like that?
I would tell myself to not be worried about not being on a set path. Mm-hmm. Don't stress out about the fact that you're not on a path that's been carved out for you. I think I felt a lot of anxiety at the time that I was kind of deviating from a lot of the paths that were familiar to me. And now I look back on that experience, and I'm very grateful that mm-hmm. I forged ahead. And so there's a lot of students out there maybe that are wondering what to do, and they have a prescribed path that is set up for them. And if you have that instinct to, ask tough questions and want more for yourself, then don't second guess that. That's a good instinct. You have the training to make an amazing life for yourself. You have all the tools and all the resources and equipment that you will need to create an incredible life of contribution, to find a vocation, not just a job. So follow that instinct and follow your bliss, as Joseph Campbell said. That would be my advice.
I love that. Dave, thank you so much. This was so much fun, awesome, and so informative and helpful. I really appreciate you giving us all of your insight and expertise. So thank you so much. If students want to learn more about the work that you do, or what it's like to be a trial lawyer, would it be okay if they reached out to you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, awesome. I can connect them. They can always reach out through me. But again, we are so appreciative, and thank you so much. And I really hope that we can see you soon.
Thank you. I hope we can see each other face to face soon.
Yeah.
That would be really
awesome.
very nice meeting you.
We'll talk later. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.